Well, guys, we're about a week away at the time at which we're recording this from the Autonomous Operations event. Jeremy, you've been my partner in crime for the last 5 months or so as we've been working on this. Brian, Dottie, you've been working on this, man, for a couple of decades, right? I mean, automation technologies.
At least.
Yeah. So starting off, I just wanted to, ask everyone, what's the most exciting part about this event for you? And Brian, since you've got seniority on both of us, I'll let you go first.
Oh, gee, thanks. Wow. Well, actually, I think this event, it actually really has a special place in my heart because in many ways, it's a validation of what I've been working on for many years now. I guess maybe as many as 20 years now, but I won't go back that far. I think back in 2013, my peers and I had this idea of building infrastructure that was autonomous. Instead of asking the question of what new feature would pique the interest of a customer or an analyst, we simply thought, what if our customers didn't have to manage it all anymore, right? And it was kind of a new way of thinking. And it was actually the genesis of an automation capability called zero-touch deployment, which I believe is one of the examples of autonomy that Dell EMC is highlighting for this event. So to answer your question, I'm excited to share this idea with the world and see it all come together.
Jeremy?
A lot similar to Brian, having covered different parts of the data center up and down the stack and across the floor, having seen the little components around zero-touch deployment and all the various different pieces of the technology in that experience, but now as they're all kind of coming together, that confluence of the technologies and that sort of 1 + 1 = 3 impact that they have when you bring the different pieces to technology, I think is really exciting. And that's, and hearing the excitement in our customers and hearing the aligned excitement in the futurists who are kind of looking well beyond the horizon at the things that other people aren't seeing. So it's the technology coming together, but also that pragmatic as well as that futurist coming together, I think is what's really exciting for me.
And I'm going to be that guy because I got to spend more time with the customers, more time with the influencers. I got to spend, a little bit of time with Mark Hamill and Michio Kaku and Dr. Michio Kaku. And that to me was just such a great experience as we were prepping for this, really getting to see what their points of view on this are. And kind of, all of our panelists are just so excited to talk about this, and they have really great perspectives. All of us we spent months circling this topic and really, digging into automation and autonomous operations. Can you give me your elevator pitch on why organizations should really prioritize this effort? And Jeremy, why don't you go first?
I think for a couple of reasons. One, it is imperative that they do, because it's one of those things like once this shift really takes off, because it already is happening, and that's a lot of what people will learn in the short term is that whether they realize it or not, they are already using autonomous technologies to some degree, some that they're aware of and some that are happening in the background that they're completely unaware of, but have become accustomed to the experience, the interface, or the outcome of it. So I think that's going to be really important. But I think that it's imperative because there is a relationship between the technologies as well as the way of operating and the digital transformation and where the industry and society and human impact and just human society is taking, where we are headed. It is imperative that one is a part of the other. And I think that it's going to be critical that organizations embrace and learn to leverage the different types of autonomous. Otherwise, they're going to be, hamstrung and handcuffed against reaching that outcome that they're looking for. And there's a bit of a paradox to it, which is, you want to take control, but using autonomous requires that you actually let go, physically and emotionally and psychologically let go of some things in order to progress forward. And that's going to be really hard for some people because we've been so used to that direct intervention kind of control. So I think it's really important because it's going to be critical to reaching that outcome, but it's not going to be easy for everybody.
And Brian, what are your thoughts?
Actually, I think Jeremy said it really well. Let me add a cost component. Can they afford not to? Right.
Yeah.
when you look at infrastructure, I mean, this is my expertise is more server based, but this is really true of any infrastructure you might find in the data center. But it's really the acquisition cost, which a lot of customers are focused on, is really just a small percentage of the overall cost, the total cost of ownership of the system, right? And the big part of that is managing it, the care and feeding of all that infrastructure. Why would anyone want to pay, manage that environment and pay for that cost burden when their competitors are not, right? And so, over time, I always think about the autonomous vehicle too, and how much do you trust? And certainly, trust is going to have to be earned when we start talking about autonomy. But and my vision of this is that you just start getting more and more equipment that doesn't need, to have firmware updates constantly. It doesn't need a complex deployment model, right? And so, just inherently capable of doing that itself, right? And so I think maybe IT administrators won't even notice it. They'll just realize, wow, this new infrastructure, I don't have to do all the care and feeding that I had to do with the previous generations of systems.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more. But for me, I mean, I think it comes down to, I always go back to my economics background in supply and demand, and I think that the thing that's in the shortest supply right now is knowledge. It's the knowledge workers, right? The technologists, the IT staff, we always hear about, especially with security, they feel overwhelmed. They don't have enough people to take on the challenges of a modern digital business. And I think that's a years out approach to fixing it if you're going to go with people, right? If we're going to educate people, that's going to take 5 to 10 years to catch up with what the market demands. And so I look at autonomous operations as the way to get around that people gap. Now, Brian, you played such a big role in helping us define the levels of automation in our framework that we'll be talking about at the event. What goes into the decision making for autonomous operations, and why is it important to have this standardized approach for our customers?
Actually, this was one of the more difficult things I had to do in my career, believe it or not. The best decision that we made actually was pulling together the best minds across Dell Technologies, including individuals from our illustrious CTO office. Our experienced design group is responsible for the customer experience, that sort of thing. Our technical marketing team, product management, and engineering organizations. We knew we needed something that was focused on outcome and not the path to get there, not the how, right? We also we knew it needed to be something lasting, a framework that would stand to pressure testing. It wouldn't be something that we'd toss away in a couple of years because, hey, there's this new technology, so this isn't relevant anymore. We really want it to be relevant over time. Finally, we knew that the top level had to set a bar that was sufficiently high that it wasn't just something that anyone had available right now, but it was also something that could be reached in maybe 5 to 10 years. So if you look at level 5 in the framework, it's a self-actualized system. It's something that's anticipating the business needs and not just managing your infrastructure for you, right? It goes beyond that, right? And we actually took a lot of inspiration from the autonomous vehicle levels produced by the Society of Automotive Engineers. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of where we got our inspiration. You see that they have 5 levels, and we also have 5 levels plus 0, which is no automation. But I think that what we came out with after lots and lots of work, months of work, and probably several hundred versions was a version that makes a lot of sense, and it really hit on the goals that I just touched on.
Great. Yeah, and as we look at this event, as it's rapidly approaching, I wanted to ask you all, when someone comes to this event, what do you think they'll walk away with? What do you want them to walk away with from this event? And Jeremy, why don't you go first?
Definitely optimism, right? Because I think that what people need to understand and walk away from is that the potential of autonomous operations really is on a massive scale. I mean, if you look back at some of the technology-driven revolutions in life and business, you think about like the Industrial Revolution, the Internet Revolution, the mobile revolution with, I would say 4G was kind of the one that really kind of tipped it over, where we started to see business models and customer experiences that were not available or even conceived before the technology arrived, but that wasn't really what was driving the technology. It was sort of a derivative of the technology being available. It started to open up that creative spark for people to start building new services and things. And I think autonomous is going to do the same, because I think, we have only scratched the surface about what we could do. We understand that we would do it. We understand that we should do it. And now is the time where the technology is catching up that we could do it. but all the things that we could do, we haven't imagined yet. And I think that's what people need to walk away from. And the other is understanding that there is, beyond a technology driver to this, there is a behavioral driver to this. And I call it sort of that prosumer intersection where we have our professional lives and our consumer lives. And a lot of what is driving our daily life, our consumer life, is starting to bleed into the expectations of how we should live and work in our professional lives, right? And the story that I give to people is that I live in a smart home, and I've converted my house to include a ton of smart technology. And I can't go back to living. Like, if I'm going to walk into this room every day at the same time to work, why do I need to turn on the lights? And why do I need to boot up my computer? It should know that I'm going to be here. It's, Tuesday morning at, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to be here if I'm not already walked in the room. And our outside, our gardens are automatically watered. I don't have to set a schedule anymore. And I don't have to worry about, is it going to rain today? Well, no, the system takes care of that. It checks the internet, or through the internet, it checks the weather and decides whether or not it needs to water the garden, or if it has sufficiently been watered naturally, or a day ago, so it doesn't need it because it's going to rain today. As I've become accustomed to these things, that prosumer intersection, I start to question the things that I repetitively do day to day at work and think, why am I doing this? Right? If you and I are talking and saying, hey, we should meet tomorrow. We should meet this week and follow up. Why can't our systems check our schedules and set that up for us? Or if something comes up that's important and it needs to move, why do I need to communicate with you to reschedule? Why can't the system just adjust that for us? And you start to think about these things, and then that naturally spirals. You think about getting into the infrastructure. Why? I did this yesterday. Why am I doing it again today? So I think these are the things, is that inspirational vision about what this potentially could do, and start getting people thinking about it, but also changing people's expectations is what they should walk away with, is that now is the time to transfer those expectations across, because now you're going to be free to do the things you want to do, not be burdened by the things that you are forced to do.
Brian, what are your thoughts?
I couldn't have said it better, Jeremy. I would say the things I want them to walk away with is excitement and wonder. When I was a kid, I always liked to think about AI, and I loved robots and all that kind of stuff. And I think that right now, AI is a burgeoning field, and we're just really scratching the surface on what it could accomplish in the IT organizations. In fact, I would almost argue that we haven't been looking at that enough, like as an industry, right? There's so much more we can do to eliminate that care and feeding, that mundane task, as Jeremy was talking about. But I was just turning down the thermostat. It was a little cold in here using my phone here. So I think Jeremy was hit on something really important there. But also, I don't want them to just walk away with something. I want them to leave something behind. I think that's really, really key here. I want them to leave their ideas, their views, maybe more importantly, their use cases, right? So as a product manager, I'm always looking at, hey, what do we do first, right? It's an infinite field of things that we can automate, right? There's an infinite number of things that you have to do in your data center, right? I'd love to automate them all, but we have to start somewhere. So yeah, get involved, join in discussions. I want to read comments and hear, what challenges that customers are having that we can maybe solve, or maybe what victories they had, right? And maybe look at ways that we can amplify that to everyone.
And for me, I think it always comes back to the customer. And, I look at things in the last 18 months, I think we can all agree have been very hard for everyone. And the challenge I run into is that not everyone's as equipped to make this transition. Digital transformation, I swear for 4 or 5 years now, it's been a buzzword that marketers love to say, salespeople hate to hear, and customers are like, oh, you've got another term for me. And, something happened in the last 18 months where it went from a buzzword to their reality. And then from there, we run into the problem where, the organization has undertaken that, but is it IT ready to support it? And we've seen a lot of challenges with it, ransomware attacks. We've seen a lot of problems with working from home and attrition and challenges with that. So people are having to rethink how they do business. And it's now a matter of, if your IT isn't open, your business isn't open. And that's a really scary proposition for a lot of these organizations that they've never had to deal with. And I think that autonomous operations is going to be one of those ways in which we can help them adjust what they're doing and move forward. So I think that's what I'm really excited about, is giving people a path forward, helping alleviate some of the stress that's being placed on IT, and really supporting them in their journeys. All right.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Nick? I think you're onto something there, and I think it connects to the work that Brian's done with the framework, because as excited as we are and as bullish as we are, and I'm sure lots of others are either in the same position or on the cusp of it. The problem is there's so much stuff out there that it's hard to make sense of, well, what technology is real today? Which one is out in the future? Which ones do I use for what outcome? You know, like, what's the right tool for which job when you're thinking about autonomous? In that sense making, I think, is the power of that framework, where we say, look, it's not just about the capability of the technology that drives how to view and sort out autonomous infrastructure and intelligent infrastructure. It's based on the outcome. Depending on what you want to achieve, what kind of autonomous operations you want or are comfortable with, what technology to use. And I think that's going to be the critical part, is that sense making, which will give people the confidence that they're looking for, to say, okay, now I understand what I'm looking at. I understand where to use it and what I'm going to get from it, or what I'm going to need in order to get what I'm being asked for. And up until now, we haven't had a good way to look at autonomous operations. It's been a lot of that vision, that speculation, conjecture. But now's the point where, with the work that Brian and the CTO team, now there's a way to understand, okay, now I can build a strategy and a plan because I have clarity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So jumping to our last question here, I want to make this real. At Dell Technologies, we always talk about making this real. So in your dealings with customers, or in your own experience, is there an anecdote that really sticks out to you that really shows why this is such a critical path for organizations right now? And I think, Brian, you probably spend more time with customers than any of us. So why don't you start off?
Sure. Yeah. There's so many. It's hard just to pick one. But I have a tremendous number of conversations with customers. We also do a lot of research. Sometimes it's blind research where, we're interviewing customers. They don't know who we are. But I remember one comment that really stuck with me. Occasionally I'll hear someone say something and I'll actually write it down because it's just so profound. But they said that the true value add of systems management is in its ability to facilitate other IT priorities. And, that may seem really obvious, but it's also quite profound. And I've kind of incorporated into my foundation, right? And I think about it at all times. Instead of trying to get, sucked into some of the details of a particular feature or capability, I'm reminded that the best management solution is one that you don't even see, right? It's one that you don't know is there, right? Allowing you to focus on what's important in business priorities. I mean, actually, Jeremy hit it really well when he was talking about the autonomous home, right? He doesn't even have to think about it, right? Because his yard is watered on a schedule according to, probably takes in factors about the rain and how much, the heat, all that kind of stuff, the temperature outside. So, that's, I think about that quote, and I that's an anecdote that really sticks with me, especially throughout this whole autonomous operations effort that we've been working on.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of what you would classify as somewhat of the detached dreamer sometimes. And so while I'm,
thing, Jeremy.
Kind of living some of that, with the smart home, I'm kind of living some of that in my life. And I understand how that prosumer sort of intersection is driving this. I just keep thinking about how big of a change this is going to be. And when we look back in retrospect, 10, 15, 20 years from now, or even, in history books, because I do think this is going to be an epoch change that will drive chapters of the technology history books. Is we don't really understand how big this is going to be. Or I know John Siegel from our lead in ISG, his blog came out today, which compared the potential impact to the combustion engine. And for me, being that sort of like thinking outside the box and in the future dreamer, I think it's a good analogy or a comparison construct, because before the combustion engine, we were somewhat limited by physical means, how far we could walk to get somewhere, or we could get on a horseback, but that horse was still walking to where we needed to go. And our lives were very localized. And then the combustion engine came along, and people just, once they saw it and they experienced it, they gravitated to it, and everybody wanted a car, and we started moving by mechanical means. And then we started putting this engine in everything. We started putting it in boats, and then we started putting it in planes, and we started to fly. But that wasn't the original intention of the combustion engine. We didn't think it was for a plane. We didn't think it was going to drive a boat. We thought it was going to create a land vehicle. But then we started to see the potential. And I think this is what's going to happen with autonomous operations. We're going to see that life is better without that mundane physical means driving everything that we can or limiting what we can do. And then our eyes will look forward to all the things that we want to do that we're now free to do. And it will be because we let go of that stuff. So for me, that potential anecdote is the one that really sticks with me.
And it's really funny, Jeremy. You and I have worked on this, for 5 months, and I think we come at this from slightly different angles, and it's really cool because you're sitting here thinking about the visionary side and the futurist and what's possible. And I go back to a conversation I must have had 3 or 4 years ago, and I make the mistake that sometimes marketers make, where we get a bright, shiny new piece of technology, and it's a Ferrari, and it's really amazing, right? It's this wow, this is exciting, sports car, and everyone should own one of these, right? Well, there's some realities to a Ferrari, right? It's expensive. It's not meant to get good gas mileage. It's only got seating for 2, right? So, sometimes we walk into these customer meetings and we're pitching this really exciting technology. It's the Ferrari. And what they really want is they really need a minivan, right? They've got kids. They need to get them to soccer practice. And one of these conversations I had with the customer really, I think, grounded my thinking on this matter. And it's, I asked them, hey, what are you guys doing with containers and Kubernetes? Do you have a plan? Are you excited to embrace DevOps and CI/CD and all this stuff? And this person was a retail shop, and it was a rather large retail shop. But, they said, Nick, does it say Facebook on the side of the building? And I go, no. And I'm a little confused. And then he goes, we can't keep our admins for 18 months. And so realizing, grounded in that reality, that this organization with a trusted name, a name that any of you would recognize, and many of you would say, that's my brand, that they're struggling to get the people in. They're struggling to keep the people. And really seeing that and realizing that, any technology solution that we bring into place needs to make things easier, right? It needs to make things more sustainable for them. And that's what has me really excited about autonomous operations, is embracing this. Is you're removing a lot of the stuff that people who are new are not going to know. You're helping people ramp quickly. You're creating a structure and a way of doing things that's repeatable, so that you're not as disrupted by these changes in your staffing levels. You're not as finding it as difficult to onboard new technologies because you have more time to figure it out.
It's almost like we're now, if you think of like the what I call the holy trinity wood triangle, is the would, the should, and the could, right? There's lots of times where you would do something and you should do it, but there's no means you can't do it, right? Or I would do it and I think I should do it, but I don't, we're not willing to do it. So we don't have the would part of it. And so I feel like with autonomous operations, we now have all 3 points of the triangle available and can hit in the middle. We know we should do it. We have a reason why we would do it or need to do it. And now finally the technology has matured to the point where we could do it. And in fact, you're probably late if you already haven't, to some degree. But the funny part is, if you look under the covers, and John Rose talks about this, there are parts of the tech, of the sort of that AO continuum that we've put together, or Brian put together, you don't even realize you're using it, right? I don't want to give away all the secrets that John talks about, but whether or not you realize it, you probably already are on that path today. But now it's become imperative that you consciously and willingly move forward with it, because if you don't, you're not going to get where you want to go. But now we have the means to do it.
Well,
Well said, Jeremy.
Well, Brian and Jeremy, I want to thank you for joining me today. We're all really excited about this event. We're really hoping that, people, come to the event, learn. This, I will tell you, this has been some of the most exciting work I've done in my career, working with some really sharp people who've really done a lot right now to help organizations figure this out. And it's not an easy journey. So having, those road markers that are out in front of you, having a map on how to get there, having an understanding of what's possible from some of the people who will be talking about this, who've gone down this path, I think it's really going to help organizations achieve, their digital future. So thank you.